Today I'm going to continue on preparing for death, and I'm following the book by Andrew Holecek. I'm starting on page 49 of his book. This section is titled Nirmanakaya, Illusory Form, and Dream Yoga. He's going through different practices that can be done to prepare for the experience of dying, and then the bardo of dharmata and the bardo of becoming. Now, these tend to be advanced practices, and I'm going to go over these maybe a little less in depth than some of the earlier practices, but it's good to know about these. So here are practices for the bardo of becoming. This is when you will be choosing, or if you have a high level of realization and practice the right practices, have a choice of rebirth, or if you don't, then it will be your karma that will really determine where you will be reborn and what form you are in, which of the six realms and so forth. But practices that help us prepare for this are dream yoga, illusory form practice. Frequently, it's illusory body. And then bardo yoga, contemplating the slogans in Lojong, slogans number 2 through 6, which are contemplations on absolute bodhicitta. And then finally, studying emptiness. If you attain recognition of the bardo of becoming, then liberation is at the level of a nirmanakaya, a form. This bardo, it is said, is where we will spend most of our time in these three bardos. This is the one we'll spend most of our time in. So dream yoga is the first one that he talks about, and he has a quote by Khenpo Karta Rinpoche, and since it's a quote of his, I have to read it. Dream yoga exists largely because it is the best preparation for this phase of the bardo. This phase of the bardo, by the way, is difficult. It's very, very chaotic, and there's a lot of fear, lots of different appearances. It is a good preparation to practice dream yoga, and basically what that means is lucid dreaming, being aware that you are dreaming, and then actually being able to direct the dream. This is taught in 3-year retreat, but it can be taught outside of 3-year retreat. And I'm not aware of it being taught outside of 3-year retreat at KTD, but I know some teachers do teach this outside of retreat. When you're in the bardo, then if you master this dream yoga, you can control the direction that you go in the bardo, because it's very similar to the experience of a dream. The next is illusory form or illusory body, and this is done during the day when we are at least awake from sleep, if not awake in terms of the Buddha being awakened. And this is about changing how we relate to appearances. This is being mindful and seeing everything as an illusion. And if you can do that, see everything that you're experiencing during the day as an illusion, then when you are in the bardo again, you can see that as an illusion too and navigate it. They're basically the same meditation applied in two different states of consciousness, awake and asleep. Either one helps us. So they are good preparation. Here is another quote from Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. To prepare for the bardo, you need to practice dream yoga. And to practice dream yoga, you need to practice illusory form. So the two are interrelated. And Khenpo Sokrim Gyamtso talks about illusory form this way, quote, look nakedly at these forms that are like rainbows, appearances, emptiness. So we need to listen to the sounds that are like echoes, the sound and emptiness. Look straight at the essence of mind, clarity, emptiness, inexpressible, and fixation-free. At ease in your own nature, let go and relax. Again, those are instructions by Khenpo Sokrim Gyamtso. Illusory form is one of the 6 yogas of Naropa. So it is an advanced practice. Bardo yoga is a contemplation. This is the 3rd practice that is mentioned in this section. And this is study the teachings about the bardos, familiarize yourself with the bardos. It's a bit like looking at a map and studying a map before you start traveling the path that is on the map or the road that is on the map. And then the next is studying emptiness and absolute bodhicitta in the slogans of Lojong, that this is related to illusory form. There is deity yoga, and this can come in handy. And deity yoga is as simple as we just did Sunday Chenrezig and Amitabha practices where we visualize ourselves as a deity. So in the bardo of becoming, if we can visualize our future parents as deities, we develop some control over where we are going to be reborn. Also, after mantra repetition of deity practices, you rest in this state of non-thought, and then you re-arise as the deity and have a sacred outlook. You see everything as an illusion. You see the forms as being the form of the deity, the sound as the deity's mantra, thoughts as the mind of the deity. So it's good to have this sacred outlook in this bardo of becoming. He mentions that, and this is the author, Andrew Holecek, that everything is an illusion, but by looking at it this way, you have a perfectly pure illusion. This transforms impure projections into pure projections and purifies things, cuts our negative reactions, and so forth. So to apply the remedies, regardless of which of these bardos we're in, we have to realize that we are in that bardo. And it's difficult to do that without preparation. So prepare now. Again, Chagda Tokul Rinpoche, there was a quote that I just think makes about 150% wisdom, which is if you have to go to the bathroom, it's too late to dig a latrine. And that's one reason why I'm presenting this class and going into it in such depth, because this is so important. So all of this about the bardos, it's meant to encourage practice, to help develop recognition so that we can have more control and better outcomes. Now, the next section is Mind Leads All Things. This starts on page 53. Mind really is our reality. There's no physical body to ground us. It's very close to when we're dreaming. If we become familiar with our minds, he uses the term wilderness. If we become more familiar with our mind, this is very helpful in preparing for the journey through the bardos. And he says, better to face it now than in the bardos. There is a quote here from Sogyal Rinpoche. The still revolutionary insight of Buddhism is that life and death are in the mind and nowhere else. Mind is revealed as the universal basis of experience. To continue here, our thoughts can take us up or they can take us down. That motivation is extremely important. I asked Rinpoche if I could do a 3-year retreat. I asked him if I could be in the first 3-year retreat, and he said yes. I was very eager to be in it. And then maybe about a year or 6 months before the retreat started, I had an interview with him, and I said, Rinpoche, I don't know if I'm ready. I was starting to have doubts. And he said, it all depends on your motivation. Well, I went in. And quite honestly, it did allow me to see my motivation. And it wasn't always pure, needless to say. If we look at our motivation, we start seeing things more clearly. But again, if we're going to clean house, we have to see the dirt. Really hard to clean house if you don't see the dirt. So now here in this section about the approach to these bardos is that these 6 realms can be seen as psychological states that we, you might say, visit daily. We can instantaneously go from a psychological state of arrogance, which would be the God realm, to that of anger, which is the hell realm. And when we are in the bardo, the difference is that instead of going from one realm to another in an instant, you are born in a realm and you might spend an aeon in that particular realm. So karma, habits, these things are seeds that are important to keep in mind. And it's important to realize that we need to purify the seeds that could sprout and lead to birth in the lower realms. And he says that if you want to know where your next life is going to be, if you don't do anything about it, examine your mind from time to time and see which of these realms you inhabit the most in this life. And that's a good indication of where you will end up in your next life if you don't develop more control over the process or accumulate more merit. and reduce your production of negative karma. Now, he mentions that the 6 realms of samsara are divided into 27 possible states of existence. And I'll have to admit, I do not know what that list of 27 possible states of existence is. Now, there is the desire realm, which consists of the 6 states of samsara, the 6 realms, but then there is the form God realm and the formless God realm. And usually they talk about 32 possible states within those 3. So I don't know what to make of this 27. I'm just going to leave it at that. Page 54, he talks about Phowa, which is a transference of consciousness. And this is a directed transference of consciousness where you might say aiming at Dewa Chen, a pure realm. And this can be done by a qualified master. I know you can also have training at KTD. They have done Phowa retreats from time to time. At these Phowa retreats, you are trained to be able to eject your consciousness. Sukhavati, pure realm of Amitabha. Dewa Chen is a Tibetan. And if that is not successful, it will definitely result in a better rebirth in the realms of samsara, better than your karma would dictate. And Phowa is a Vajrayana practice, needless to say. Again, like all these other practices, if we don't take control, karma will take control. Kalu Rinpoche is quoted here. The verb Phowa implies leaving one place for another. It is related to a technique used at the moment of death, which allows one to leave the 6 realms and go to a land of pure manifestation, like the land of bliss. Now, it goes into a little bit about this, so I will go through this quickly. There are 9 possible exits in the body for consciousness to leave. And depending upon which exit the consciousness leaves, that has a lot of influence on the realm that you will be reborn in. The best place is up here, the top of your head. And it's 8 finger widths behind your normal hairline. So like this is Tibetan measurement. We were taught this in retreat. I gave Rinpoche a grin, and I went like this because that's where my hair starts, is way in the back here. And he gave me a grin back. And then I did it the right way. Rinpoche had a sense of humor, a very healthy one. So anyway, that is where you want consciousness to leave. And you can be trained to have your consciousness exit at that point. It involves our subtle channels, our subtle energy, and channel and drops, tigle, and so forth. So a successful Phowa depends on our lack of negative karma or purification of negative karma, faith and confidence, trust, If it is going to be a Vajra master that's doing the Phowa, then trust in both the practice and trust in the master. And of course, you want to cut your worldly attachments so that you're not thinking, I don't want to leave my body. I don't want to leave my house or my whatever. In fact, even if there's not going to be a Phowa, before you die, it's good to make arrangements for your property to have it distributed so you can just let go of being concerned about that, knowing that it's going. But on the other hand, don't give everything away and then go, what am I going to do now? If you look at your property and your possessions and so forth, you can lighten up. It's good when death is approaching that you can make mental offerings to benefit others. Tonglen is good. The mandala offering, which is representing the wealth of the universe, is good. There are lots of things that we can do to lighten this burden of property that we have, so it's easier for us to let go. And there's a quote from the Dalai Lama: at the moment of death, I will meditate on bodhicitta. It will help me continue on my way to enlightenment. We're going to talk about Phowa later on in the book, but this is a good overview of that. There is a quote here from Talopa: Phowa is the only method in the Dharma where a being can be liberated without profound meditation experience. There are a lot of other quotes in here. Feel free to read them. I'm not going to read them all. Next is the Shitro and Vajrasattva practice. This is on page 57. The Shitro practice requires empowerment and specific instructions. Very simply, Wang, a lung, and a tree. These are Tibetan words. A Wang is an empowerment. A lung is a reading transmission of the practice in Tibetan, read very quickly. A tree, T-R-I, is the instructions on how to do it. Now, I can't remember the exact year, but before COVID, Trungpa Rinpoche was at Lamatashi's Center north of Toronto, and they gave teachings on Shitro and so forth. And there was a Shitro practice that the empowerment was given, there was a lung, and there were instructions. I was there for that. These practices are to familiarize yourself with the peaceful and wrathful deities, and hopefully you can recognize them when you're actually in the bardo. The Shitro practice, Vajrasattva practice, the Vajrasattva practice is the 100-syllable mantra. This represents the seed syllables of the 100 peaceful and wrathful deities in the bardo, and it opens up this subtle channels. It helps us recognize things. The actual mandala of the 100 peaceful and wrathful deities is on the cover of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's book on the bardo, The Interval of Possibility. And here is a quote by Francesca Fremantle, who helped Trungpa Rinpoche in his book on the bardo. The quote is, recognition is the keynote of this whole teaching. But if we cannot recognize what we have never met, So its message to us during this life is to get to know all these manifestations of mind while there is still time. Another aspect of the Vajrasattva practice, of course, is purification. And by purifying karma, it weakens what's metaphorically called the winds of karma. And this is what propel us through the bardos to our next life. The weaker winds of karma are, the more power we have to make better outcomes at the end of the process through the bardos. So it talks here again about the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and it is about purification, seeing everything as emptiness. This is the ultimate purification, because this is the way things really are. Going back to how I started, no beginning, no end, no in between. Well, we're the in between right now, and when we are in between birth and death, and when we are in the bardo, again, we will be in between death and birth. But if we realize that all of this is just projections of our mind and an illusion, this is the way things actually are in terms of emptiness and the ultimate. Here is another quote: emptiness cannot harm emptiness. So whatever we experience in the bardos, peaceful or wrathful deities, if we see them as empty, they are harmless. On the other hand, if we have dualistic thinking, I exist, other exists, then others can hurt us. And this is the basis of fear and, of course, selfish thinking. Even in the bardo, when we have no physical body whatsoever, our habitual patterns are such and our karma is such that we still believe we are somebody. And therefore, there is fear. So if we can remove this sense of self, if we can see that as empty, see what our experience is as empty, the fear is gone. Now we'll go on to the next section, which is working with passion. This is important in the bardo of becoming. So one way to work with passion is periods of celibacy or relating with sexual energy. If we can do that, this gives us time to choose our parents. Because what happens if we're going to have a human birth, we will see our future parents in sexual union. You will become attached to one person in terms of pleasure, sexual pleasure, and the other one you will see in union with the one that you're attached to and develop anger and aversion. And then, as a result of that, you might say things just keep on getting worse. And you jump in the middle of that, and there we go. This is very important. Again, this is why if you can visualize your future parents as deities, this gives you some space. You might say investigate before you jump in. So if we can transform passion into compassion, we can block the womb door, and that will prevent our entry into samsara. Here is a quote from Trangu Rinpoche. If you are not overpowered by sexual desire, then your mind will become stable and the whole thing will slow down somewhat, so you can examine the situation that you are moving towards. I think this is a good example. Now, remember, in the bardo of becoming, it's a very scary situation. Rinpoche has compared it to be like you're in a battle. Now, this would be a Tibetan version of a battle, which would be on horseback. And you're thrown off your horse and you're on the ground. And of course, then you're very vulnerable and you're going to jump on the first horse that doesn't have a rider on it that comes by. And maybe you don't want to jump on that first horse. My version of this in a more modern situation is, let's say that you are in Chicago and it's midnight and you're feeling very fearful, like there are people on the street here that look dangerous. And a bus stops. Now, do you look at where that bus is going or do you just hop on it? Because there are places in Chicago that are even scarier than where you are. So the idea is to be able to slow down, control this energy so you can make wiser choices. Now, Alexander Holecek recommends reverse meditation of watching erotic movies and seeing how your energy of desire operates, getting to know that. Now, myself, I'm not going to do that. But the idea is to have a healthy relationship with passion on our own terms. So in my notes here, I say, I don't recommend doing this, but try to get to become more knowledgeable about your energy of passion. Now, the next is insurance dharma, which is on page 59. He says that, well, I've covered a lot of practices and this can be intimidating. Which ones to emphasize? How many do I do? How well do I have to do it? Da, 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 da. So stability, relaxation, peace of mind are very, very important. But he feels that's really all you need is to have that stability, relaxation, peace of mind, to avoid feeling overwhelmed. As death approaches, take refuge in the practice that you are familiar with. Your favorite meditation, your favorite mantra, and that sort of thing. I'm going to talk about this later in more depth, but Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche has helped his students put together a bardo package. And in there are chants that would be excellent to play in your room before you die. They're in Tibetan, but there is the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and then various purification practices and aspiration prayers. And I have worked with people that are dying and have found this very beneficial. And it can also be very beneficial for the people in the room that aren't dying, that are there to comfort the person that is dying, or because they're very concerned about the person that is dying. There was one woman that I worked with that as she approached death, she lost, and this was days earlier, her ability to move, except for one thing, and that was she could wiggle one of her big toes. And when I played the chant, the people in the room would play the chant when I wasn't there, that she would wiggle her toe. So keep that in mind, that the bardo packet has a lot in it that can be very, very beneficial. So at the time of death, choose a meditation, actually in advance, practice it as much as you can, and then as the time of death approaches, remind yourself again and again, quote, "At the time of death, I will not let myself be involved with any negative thoughts." Reduce negative thinking in general in daily life. And what this means is pay attention to your mind, what's going on in your mind, and when you see a negative thought or thought patterns, then let go of it. Let go of it because it will just hold you back. So the next point is that in order to achieve the meditative clarity, peace, stability, meditate over and over again. So this will allow you to have your mind in the right place as you are dying. And now he has a few things that are mentioned here that are to help us protect our minds from negativity. So, of course, Om Mani Padme Hung is a great one to say. If you're having a negative thoughts, just say Om Mani Padme Hung, Om Mani Padme Hung, Om Mani Padme Hung. Say it all day long. Say it loud. Say it quietly. Try different tunes to it. Make up your own tune. In other words, have fun with it. Relax and just say it. He also mentions Om Mani Dewa Re, which is Amitabha's mantra. That is excellent too. Another form of protection, he says, to listen to your favorite teachings as you die. Personally, I feel it's better to listen to the bardo packet chants. And these will connect you to Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, listening to him chant these aspiration prayers in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And this allows your mind to be focusing on wisdom rather than confused negative thinking. And he says if your practice is stable, you don't need a Phowa. So proficiency is very, very important. So beginning with shamatha, vipassana, insight meditation, bodhicitta, these are very, very foundational things to develop to prepare for dying. Deity yoga, guru yoga, mahamudra, or Dzogchen practices are good. These are more advanced. In his words, if everything else fails in the bardo, it's nice to know that we have these emergency teachings. This is what he calls dharma insurance. Then to finish up this section, he has here a summary of this part of the book. It's about death of ego, self-deception, delusion, the two truths, relative truth and absolute truth. And it's important to remember that the relative truth is the relative of absolute truth. And absolute truth is the absolute of relative truth. Relative truth is considered false truth. It is this fabricated ego that we have. But ultimate truth, I think I mentioned this last time in the Mahamudra lineage supplication, one of the last phrases that are chanted is that may I realize the inseparability of samsara and nirvana, that absolute truth transcends samsara and nirvana. It's dualistic to think that you have samsara here and then over here is nirvana, and we want to go from samsara to here, leaving samsara behind. But they're inseparable. So this is important to remember, that our meditation practice is a way of stepping out of ego. It is focusing on the present as opposed to ego focusing on attainment or the future or the past. Quote here in the book is, any meditation practice concerned with transcending ego is focused in the present moment. Then he talks a little bit about let go, let be. If we can just let go, that spaciousness, a feeling of spaciousness enters, and that this allows room for our Buddha nature to flower, for us to experience that. And every moment has dignity, precision, has a certain beauty about it, and is meaningful. He has a quote by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche: every act of our lives can contain simplicity and precision and can thus have tremendous beauty and dignity. He then talks about how if we can die now, we won't die in the bardo. And what he means is, if our ego can die now, there's nothing to die in the bardo. And it's important to remember, he doesn't mention this, but I really like Traleg Rinpoche's idea of a functional self. A functional self sees samsara as an illusion, but it also knows how to function within this illusion, as opposed to it's an illusion and I don't know what the hell is going on here. I remember Trungpa Rinpoche saying, no, we do not need enlightenment wards because enlightened people won't know how to operate in samsara. So the idea is that if we can reduce and eliminate this thinking that we are unique, permanent, and so forth, we can still function quite well in samsara, but we're not going to be controlled by our delusions. So after the death of ego, you become fully alive. Thupten Rinpoche, only a dead man has nothing to lose and nothing to gain. To finish this section up, become familiar with your deathless nature now, and it will be so much easier to recognize it at the time of death. The child luminosity will recognize its mother. So I might as well explain the child luminosity a little bit. As we do these various practices, we start to get glimpses of the ultimate nature of our mind, which is beyond concept. It is very, very different. There are certain feelings that go with it, bliss, non-thought, and some others. But if we get familiar with that, at the time of death, much greater, more powerful luminosity appears. It's called the mother luminosity. And if we have recognized even a little bit of this child luminosity, when the mother luminosity appears, we will recognize it and will be liberated. But if we haven't experienced or realized experiencing the child luminosity, when the mother luminosity appears, we will not recognize it. It'll be too intense, too bright, and it'll scare us. So now is Dharma wills and the Dharma box. This is on page 61. He begins by saying, just imagine the peace of mind that you would have if you felt that everything that you would like to be done for you is being done for you. And it's being done by people that you trust. Well, there's only one way to have that happen, and that is for you to put down in writing what you would like to have done. Later on in the book, we'll go into this in much more detail, but this is a very good introduction. He recommends having a group of friends that are Dharma friends, and you talk about this, what you would like to have done as you are dying. And again, the bardo packet that was put together under Rinpoche's instructions has a lot in there that can be helpful. And if you can make out a Dharma will and put these things down in writing, then when you die, you're not going to leave a mess for other people to clean up after you're gone. I have heard a lot of stories from people who a loved one has died and it takes years for them to straighten things out financially. It's really good to get these things taken care of while you're alive so that you're leaving much less work for the people that are going to be cleaning up after you. It can actually make you feel good that you have been doing these things. So the Dharma will would be the worldly measures that you would like to have done so that you die under the circumstances that you would like. And you would entrust friends to carry out this Dharma will, and it would be like practices that you would like to have done for you, maybe people, Rinpoche's teachers that you would like to have contacted, maybe prayers at a monastery that you would like to make donations to, and so they are done, and so forth. There's a columbarium out at Carmeling that it would be good to have a niche reserved there for your ashes. And that also means that you would want to make preparations to be cremated and then have cremains shipped out to Carmeling. So he recommends having a community of 2 or more people that would have similar feelings about the Dharma to help you prepare for dying, and you would be helping them the same way because you don't know who's going to die first. And then have this vision of how you would like to die and the other people involved, how they would like to die. And then do what you can to implement these and plan on implementing these. He says, stay in touch with these people and maybe every year update your wishes because you might have changed. And then if somebody starts going downhill and there's a question of them dying soon, this group of people then would gather together and develop a strategy on how to work with this situation. Also, he says, maybe have a list of people you want to be by your bed in the hospital, in the nursing home, or wherever as you are dying. Maybe have a person that would be the manager of this group, a person that can take control when you no longer can. Myself, I just went to a lawyer last year and developed a new power of attorney for medical care and a durable power of attorney for if I can no longer manage my financial affairs and all the other things that need to be managed in the mundane world. And takes a load off of your shoulders or off of your mind, knowing that this has been taken care of. Now, the Dharma will is more of an informal document. You wouldn't necessarily have to go to a lawyer, and in fact, you wouldn't need to go to a lawyer. You would have contact information in this Dharma will. As I said to the teachers, maybe monasteries where you would want prayers to be said, or perhaps sponsoring pujas. It would include any kind of rituals that you would like to have done for you, maybe by your friends at the local center, at KTD, wherever. He says visit funeral homes and discuss things with them. It could be getting cremated, the cremation. It doesn't mean you have to pay for this in advance, but at least make some plans in advance at the funeral home about how you want your body to be treated. And instructions, if you die in a hospital, who do you want in the room with you? Then he has the Dharma box, and that's where you keep your Dharma will. And in this box, then you would have a lot of other things in it, a list of people who you want with you. And it might be a list of people you don't want with you, people that get you upset. This is something I noticed even before I was a Buddhist, that when my grandmother died, well, this is actually 6 months before she died, but she was on her deathbed. And her children, some of her children were in the room, some grandchildren were in the room. This was like in May, and they would be saying things like, oh, hold on till Thanksgiving, Grandma. Please hold on for Thanksgiving or Christmas, and on and on and on like that. Everybody was standing at quite a distance from the bed. Nobody was up close to Grandma. Well, this could be very disconcerting for a dying person when they're telling you, don't die, don't die. And instead of touching you and giving you comfort, they're standing at a distance. At the very least, you might put in their instructions on don't encourage the person to hang on and stay because of your own wants to have them live a little bit longer. Take into consideration the person that is dying and what they need to do. And then, of course, all of us probably have family members or friends that aren't Buddhist, and they need to have some instruction too about this, but at least from a Buddhist perspective, what is being done, so it doesn't seem so strange. The box would include copies of your legal documents. You're probably going to want them in a safe deposit box as well. Perhaps ritual items. It could be a text, could be a statue, it could be something else. Could be some things from the bardo packet. It could be the whole bardo packet is in this Dharma box. And then instructions to your family and friends.